In 2007, Russia planted a flag at the seafloor of the Arctic, a stunt that shocked the world. Did Russia really just try and claim the Arctic by means of ancient conquest? Well, luckily, their claim was widely disregarded as illegitimate, but rather it was seen as symbolic. What Russia did was revitalize interest in the region. All of a sudden, the Arctic was relevant again. So, why does an individual study the Arctic, though? First, I'm a student of political science. I love the discipline, especially the facet of international relations. And last fall, I took a geography course here with Professor Chip Dodd, and I really enjoyed it. Geography suddenly became a passion to me. I took another climate course, and it seemed like geography and politics combined perfectly into geopolitics, defined as the role of space, location, or geographic position in international relations. So, why should you as an audience member care about the Arctic, though? Well, first, we don't really see the effects of it here in Seattle yet, but we will see it eventually. The Arctic will determine future availability of natural gas and petroleum here. And second, there are some humanitarian concerns involved with it as well. One, melting ice sheets in the Arctic can raise sea levels, and it's speculated if sea levels raise just 1 meter, coastal towns such as Bangladesh will suffer displacement up to 10% of their people, which in Bangladesh is 12 million people. Second, there are also dangers associated with Arctic drilling. We're all familiar with the incident in the Gulf of Mexico with British Petroleum, right? Well, the problem is the Arctic conditions are much more dangerous than what we find in the Gulf of Mexico, so if there was a disaster there, it would be much worse. I just did it. My bad. So, the Arctic is regionally unique and significant. My thesis: there have been changes in the physical composition of the Arctic as a result of climate change that have opened the door for resources, international law, and numerous sovereignty conflicts, the likes of which we haven't seen before. So, I view the Arctic through the lens of two different ways of knowing. First was the international relations systems approach. It symbolizes the world as one global system of interactions between actors. This includes the 7 billion individuals on the planet, the hundreds of sovereign states, the tens of thousands of non-government organizations, and etc. And second was the regional approach, which examines what makes a region unique in geography based on all relevant biotic, which is living, and abiotic, which is non-living conditions. It's the fusion of these two ways of knowing that helped me really understand the Arctic in a different way. So, kind of a roadmap. We're going to go over the physical state of the Arctic, the sovereignty and international law in the area, and the resources. So, first off is the region itself. Geographers understand the Arctic as the area above 66 degrees 30 minutes north latitude. This is established by where the sun doesn't set in the northern hemisphere summer solstice. Now, the Arctic encompasses nation-states such as Russia, Norway, Canada, Denmark, and Greenland. Well, the state of the Arctic has changed a lot because of climate change. This is very important. For one, empirical evidence. Arctic sea ice has decreased 40% since the 1970s. This is over a short span of time, the rate of change has been incredible. It's something like we've never seen before, and there's no indication that this is going to slow down. Further than this, there are conditions of the Arctic that perpetuate change. This is what we call in geography as a positive feedback. As we release more greenhouse gas into the atmosphere, as a result of human activities and maybe natural processes, it'll heat the atmosphere, which will get rid of ice in the Arctic. Well, ice is one of the most reflective surfaces on Earth. So as the ice goes away, it's replaced by ocean, which has very low reflectivity, so it's going to absorb a lot more heat than that ice initially did. So it's going to accelerate heating in the area. And as that heating accelerates, it'll also melt or evaporate water, which releases water vapor into the atmosphere, which is also a greenhouse gas. And third, it also melts permafrost, which releases methane into the atmosphere, which is 23 times more effective than carbon dioxide at trapping infrared radiation. So we're going to examine the sovereignty and international law of the Arctic. For one, the Arctic is a global commons, a part of the ocean. The global commons is a resource that everyone has access to, no one has ownership over it, we all use it, such as the atmosphere as well. But to prevent people from abusing this privilege, we have to make guidelines. Well, the Arctic is an area of interaction between all actors in the international system. We see sovereign states such as Canada, the United States, non-government organizations such as the Inuit Circumpolar Council, multinational corporations such as Shell and BP, and intergovernmental organizations such as the United Nations. And they all have different goals in mind, and they all have different levels of sovereignty, so we have to provide some structure for them to act. So, intergovernmental organization United Nations established the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Now, mind you, this was not a result specifically of what's happening in the Arctic. UNCLOS was established in the 20th century mostly as a response to the problems in the ocean such as overfishing. Now, it does apply uniquely to the Arctic in terms of something called the exclusive economic zone. This is a zone stretching from a nation-state's shores that they have complete control over the resources. UNCLOS stipulates that nation-states or sovereign states have exclusive economic zone reaching 350 nautical miles past their shore based on the limits of their continental shelves. But there's problems with the law itself, and there's gray areas within the law that have caused conflicts. I'm going to highlight 3 of these conflicts in specific. First is Norway versus Russia. Well, their exclusive economic zones overlap in the Barents Sea. So what do you do about that? Well, they established something called the clarifications on the limits of the continental shelf, hereto referred to as the CLCS, where they can submit claims. Both Russia and Norway have submitted claims. We haven't seen that resolved yet. Second is Canada versus the world. We know the Bering Strait, what separates Russia from North America. But Canada thinks that it falls within their exclusive economic zone. Canada thinks that they have sovereignty over the area so they can control who goes through the Bering Strait. Luckily, this has been disregarded by most of the world, and Canada does not have sovereignty over the Bering Strait. And third, there's the United States versus the United Nations. Most states have ratified UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, but the United States is the one Arctic state that has not ratified it. And why is this, you might ask? Well, for one, the United States doesn't want to sacrifice their sovereignty. It's speculated that they're not going to ratify it because the United States does not want to participate in something where they do not have the majority vote. But this has not been resolved yet. Well, most of these conflicts are a result of pursuing speculated resources in the Arctic, which brings me to resources. The Arctic has a very big supply of petroleum and natural gas. The USGS speculates that there's 1/4 of the world's petroleum left in the Arctic and 1/3 of the world's natural gas left in the Arctic. Even just that one part of the Arctic called the Stockman Field is the second largest deposit of natural gas in the entire world, about 400 nautical miles off the coast of Russia. The gathering of these resources has begun. Territory has been leased to oil companies such as Shell, BP, ExxonMobil, Ezi, Total, Gazprom, and Statoil Hydro. And petroleum drilling will begin within the next few years or within the next decade. Natural gas, not for a while. There's more complications involved with the drilling of natural gas, such as creating pipelines that have to stretch hundreds of miles within dangerous conditions such as the Arctic. You wouldn't want iceberg running in, or you wouldn't want ice running into the pipeline, breaking it, because then you have a crisis on your hands. World energy needs. Well, both of these are depletable resources, unfortunately, but it's speculated that with the oil and natural gas in the Arctic, it's enough to sustain world energy needs for a full 7 years. While this is mighty impressive, it also solidifies that we are indeed running out of these resources. So where does this bring us? Well, the Arctic, a fascinating area of interaction between all actors in the international system, a global commons without structure. So intergovernmental organizations such as the United Nations provide structure for us. They provide UNCLOS, but the law has gray areas which leads to sovereignty conflicts, some of which are being resolved as of now, others aren't going to be resolved for some time. And the drilling plans are moving forward. We're going to see plans from Shell, BP, Ezi, Total, Statoil Hydro. All of them will be drilling for petroleum within the next decade and natural gas within the next few decades. And all of this is possibly because climate change has altered the physical state of the Arctic so much. 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, none of this would have been imaginable because the Arctic was too much ice. But not only is the Arctic an arena for how oceanic law will progress in the future, but it is also the future of oil and gas needs for a significant portion of the world. Thank you.